I will come from a quite different presentation style than the previous one, which was excellent, by the way. And so let me see how it works. This is simply pressing this. It is working. Yes. So I start from the company. I'm a company person right now. I've been used to be in the university, but I moved 20 years ago into pharma. I'm still a compulsive scientist, so I'm going to talk to you as a scientist. What Takeda is a pharmaceutical company that started in Japan about 270 years ago, is still around, and actually has been changing into a much more global company in the recent few years. And these changes has been a restriction of the overall R&D focus around oncology, gastroenterology, and CNS. And as you know, CNS is a complex disease area, and also engaging in developing new drug for problem in psychiatry, neurology is not an easy task. On the other hand, about 30% of the population as a prevalence data are suffering from a CNS disorder. So the unmet need is clearly there. Now, Takeda has been developing over the last 18 months 43 different partnerships and is engaged in at least 28 consortia. So this is reflecting the sort of mindset that was discussed just a few hours ago about open innovation. And Mark, I believe, was just a month ago in our premises in London to introduce the concept of open innovation together with other speakers, including our CEO, that is actually sitting in Boston. And so this is the mindset that is coming through. And in CNS area in particular, we are focusing on these areas, on treatment-resistant depression, on schizophrenia negative syndrome, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, and some rare disorders. The key factor is that there should be lack of satisfactory treatment and a clear met need that is driven by the need of patients and the need of society. And this is where we are working right now. And we are developing 80% of our assets are completely new mechanisms. So there is a risk-taking attitude that we are progressing here. But the point is why we should be in consortia, in particular in pre-competitive consortia. So those are the reasons why a company in general, in particular our company, should be in this consortia, understand the emerging trend and share with the larger scientific population and clinical, generate portfolio relevant data, advance science policy and the regulatory issue, and then basically address the challenge of the clinical development, which is something very important to us, accelerated discovery and so on. So those are quite critical elements that I believe can be shared. And IMI is a prototypical example of a pre-competitive partnership can work, and I've personally been involved for 9 years in IMI in different companies, and so I'm a sort of believer. And this interpretation is actually fitting in a specific problem that I would like to carry and bring to you. So basically, clinical development for CNS, related disorders is complex and is daunting and has been associated with the failure of several progression of assets. And the 4 key reasons for that are the poor disease biology understanding in CNS in respect to cancer or other disorders, the heterogeneous patient population that we have in our clinical trial, the low precision of the assay that we are using. In particular, those are questionnaires or scores that the psychiatrists subjectively give on a basis of a template to the patient. And finally, the operational challenge associated to the complexity of clinical trial and the regulatory request. So the answer to this could be related to a better understanding driven by genetics, patient-centric disease assessment, which is driving around the needs of the patient, the biology exploration, and the use of computational approach. And here in IMI, we have partnerships that are addressing those, like phago-adapted stem banks or ethionomy, for example. And then we have another, regarding the heterogeneous population, the enrichment strategy using biomarkers is a critical approach for that. A deep phenotyping is another model that is basically bringing several biomarkers into a profiling exercise. And here we have another 3, like Amipad, Pharmacog, and PRISM projects that are working addressing this topic. Low precision endpoint, digital surrogate may give a new avenue, if you want, for assessing, for increasing the precision of the estimate of clinical changes. And this is specific signal that can be driven by this enrichment biomarker strategy that we have. And again, we have another 3 consortium that are addressing this very point. And finally, the operational challenge. This is a critical aspect that the Think Big approach is taking care of in these days. So I have to say that IMI is fulfilling what we are expecting to be, let's say, cutting-edge drives towards the solution of the problem. And I show you 2 examples, one is PRISM, which started 2 years ago, and is a psychiatric rating using intermediate stratified markers, is the acronym for this nice definition, which is addressing one of the key problems about the relationship between symptom and classification of disease in psychiatry, which is still a debate. And the way we have been designing this study, this proposal, and that was actually endorsed by the academic consortium in a very interesting manner, was to identify a set of biomarkers, imaging, and other kind of approach, including genetics, to highly and with deep phenotyping approach to characterize patients. The patients, however, are coming from a specific dysfunctional phenotype, which is social withdrawal. Now, we do not have a satisfactory clinical scales for social withdrawal. There are none. And so what is very intriguing is that social withdrawal, according to several reports, has been perceived as one of the first symptoms in MCI Alzheimer individuals, the one that will progress towards Alzheimer, as well as in schizophrenia negative symptom, in particular in kids or adolescents that are showing this behavior of lack of interest. They stop to go to school, they do not move from home, they basically spend all their time on video games and related. So this was the idea, to get these 2 populations together using a diagnostic criteria which is driven by the social withdrawal, and then basically see what was the kind of neurobiological and neuroscientific underpinnings for that. So a very rich group of distinguished academic colleagues has been teaming up for proposing this approach, and a group of drug companies. And the translational vision and neurobiological vision is quite schematically represented here, that is describing how this deep phenotyping is targeting the brain, both in humans and in animal model of social relationship and social interaction. But what I'm very interested in is actually the clinical study that, or proof of concept that has been designed. If you start from lower point here, the diagnosis and the level of the social withdrawal in the 2 populations of schizophrenics and MCI individuals is based on the WODAS. The WODAS is the WHO disability self-scored assessment. This is not exactly a very sensitive instrument. A recent study from Norway saw a quite poor reliability in testing changes. And actually, this test is a self-score questionnaire that is talking about the quality of life, if you want, or parameters of daily life. And one chapter is about social interaction. And this question is based on the question, what happened in the last 30 days? And then there are these questions. Now, can you imagine go to a subject with memory deficits like this population and ask us this question? I personally don't know if I can answer this question. I don't know, maybe you can. But, it's not an easy task. So this, of course, question is extremely poor in the way that can be picturing social withdrawal. So what basically was happening was that we move into the characterization of the neurobiology, as I say, point 2, and existing database that are what is present in the literature, but also in several other academic repository sites or experts that has been working in this area. And there is a way to integrate all this data using, an algorithmic approach and statistical methodology that then put together with the result that we'll be obtaining. But for me, most interesting is the possibility to use a digital technology for mapping social relationship. And the smartphone is actually built for that, particularly if it is used by the people, of course. So there is a subgroup of patients that are using smartphone that will be explored on the basis of the use of the smartphone. And of course, the smartphone can actually capture quite a lot of socially relevant interaction. Is the time spent over the phone on phone call, number of phone calls, SMS messages. There are all, social interactions. Time spent on social networks that can be recorded. Actually, one interesting aspect is the use of Wi-Fi. how long the Wi-Fi is, if you monitor it using the cloud and you put this in the database, how long the Wi-Fi of your home is present as a sign in your smartphone. This can be a surrogate marker of how long you stay home. And when you go out, can you switch on another Wi-Fi that is coming from the bar when you go, for example, or the pub? So this sort of information are building a data set that is completely unusual for the healthcare system, but is actually very important from the social aspect of this. So this data analysis will be activated using several methodologies, including one of those machine learning algorithms that is able to take care of, is a classifier at the end of the day, but it can classify subjects according to high and low sociability. And this can be correlated with the deep phenotyping data set to identify subgroup of biologically driven social problem, if you want to say, and see if it's actually mapping on the probability to develop the disease. And this is what PRISM is doing. And actually, our intention is to bring this technology in particular and some other biomarker to the attention of the EMA, which is part of our team, and actually to have a scientific opinion that may drive the development of this biomarker in a proper direction for becoming an endpoint or something that can be used for clinical trial for drug discovery. And this digital initiative is not alone. Actually, after, a few years ago, there was a beginning for IMI on CNS. Radar CNS is actually an initiative that was developed around epilepsy, major depressive disorder, and multiple sclerosis, again, to identify digital phenotype. And from this, a radar ID has been generated, and in a few minutes we talk about this. And then another initiative, which is Diamond, which is focusing on building a regulatory acceptable digital endpoint for locomotion or for what is called the walk test that you've been used in several disorders in which disability of locomotor, capacity of locomotor activity is considered a clinical relevant endpoint like MS or even other kind of disorders. And finally, the Think Big initiative, in which a big chunk of this is dedicated to digital technology, perceived by the EPIA CEO as a game-changing implementation for clinical trial. And of course, I believe on it, as you can see, because for CNS disorder, it's definitely a very high probable outcome that we believe in this. And so the other ID is going to start soon, and we are progressing recently through the analysis of our reviewer. And the target is the development of technology that could enable a quantitative analysis of the decline in people that are progressing Alzheimer's disorder. This is sort of profiling the functional capability of individuals and the cognitive as well, so correlating with traditional measurement and moving into some sort of independent digital-based profiling of the individuals. Of course, it's a broad area of exploration. There is nothing that has been validated at the level of regulatory authority in this field, and also at the scientific level, there are very few descriptors. Just in parenthesis, one at the cutting edge, Jeffrey Case in Oregon State, in the United States, has been exploring the possibility to work with the automotive industries. And in particular, he was setting up a methodology to passively monitor the driving style of people. And he just published a few months ago a paper showing that individuals with the probability to develop Alzheimer's with an MCI, let's say, diagnosis, and that they have memory deficit, they drive much worse than the others, in a way. And this can be captured with a couple of weeks of profiling the driving styles with a simple SPY system that is collecting, the use of various gears, the speed, and so on and so on. And since generally they drive on the same highway, they can normalize or the same kind of, they go to work or they do it. They can actually normalize it and build the statistics around this that can be quite robust. So where we were discussing before, like Natalie was mentioning, I think is happening. And we are hoping that a team of academics will join us for proposing these solutions that technologically can be very interesting, and we look for some really innovative change and not going along the typical path. And so we are really hoping that. I was even asking, if somebody from all over the world, in Japan or in other countries, they were interested in moving in this direction. And of course, in technologies developing at the digital level in several directions, and we should keep a really open mind for that. So where are we? This is a 36-month project. A group of companies are driving it. The budget is relatively small, and we are reviewing right now the outcome, and we are looking for having at least the starting of this activity that can be actually implementing also the knowledge that is developed in the radar CNS at the King's College as a potential way to join forces and possibly deliver something of relevance. So what is the summary now? Pre-competitive partnering, I believe, is a critical element, aspect for the open innovation, which is perceived the way to deliver productivity, as we learned an hour ago, and in particular when we're dealing with developing a new treatment for patients and bring this treatment rapidly, and not to take 10 years to develop a drug as we're doing right now. And I think that we have an opportunity in this pre-competitive partnership in advancing science and speeding the research and development, but this opportunity can be lost as well. So it depends very much about motivations and the kind of chemistry that is going to build into the consortium. Not all consortia are successful. And since I started IMI several years ago with the NewsMed, and I continue with Pharmacog and so on, I have to say that I've been part of quite a successful team. But it's not always the case, and we have to be very careful. And actually, in the pharma, we have continuously the people that are naysaying, that are telling us, well, where is the impact of what you're doing in this consortium? And so it is critical that we see something coming out that is impacting what we are doing every day. It could be something that patients consider critical, and this will help us to drive some support for regulatory and also payers-driven, appreciation of what we're doing. And for us, this is the main route. So it is essential that we have patient associations and regulatory representative in our team. Actually, I would go even beyond. I would say commercial and payers should be there as well. And there is also another situation that I consider quite important that we are learning in the roadmap initiative in these days. We don't need only scientists sitting from the company. We need people with experience in communication, in commercial or finance, if you want. We need people with understanding of other aspects of the business. Because we've been focusing a lot on science in these days. I mean, in particular, on the project that I've been working on, science has been driving the show, but we are talking about incremental impact, and incremental impact is critical that people that is able to build a regulatory package will be part of the team. And nobody in academia can do this. But we can, actually. We have very, very good people that can do this easily. So I believe that we have to bring every competence that are needed into this consortium. And yes, so I believe that this is a final statement. What we need to see are facts that are producing an impact on patient, impact on society, and impact on our business. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to support this consortia that is true, they are growing, but they are stretching also our resources to a certain extent. Thank you for your attention.